Sound Minds Radio, getting you behind the research and ideas in contemporary life. This episode produced by Michael Schubert. Sound Minds Radio, part of the Community Radio Network. soundminds.com.au.
The other day I came across the Indigenous Weather Knowledge Project on the website of the Australian Government's Bureau of Meteorology. This project recognises the traditional weather and climate knowledge that has been developed and passed down through countless generations by Australia's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. In this program I'll talk with Dr. John Ryan, an environmental philosopher at Edith Cowan University in Perth, who's followed along with this project. I'll also talk with Professor Tim Entwisle, Director of the Royal Botanic Gardens, Melbourne, who's developed his own ideas about our approach to the Australian seasonal calendar. The story starts with your own view of the seasons. Is it just the changes in weather, ecology and hours of daylight caused by the Earth's rotation around the Sun, combined with the gentle tilt of the Earth's axis? Well, that's the received wisdom, or at least the received education for many of us. But if you live far enough north or south, the change in sunlight becomes dramatic, and some animals choose hibernation over hanging around for the winter, or the other obvious choice of the seasonal avoider, migration. Humans stay put and mark their calendar with the seasons. Many of us are familiar with what Professor Tim Entwisle calls the Vivaldi seasons. The traditional spring, summer, autumn and winter of London.
My key point would be that I'm more interested in people having a think about where they are, noticing what's going on around them, rather than particularly coming up with a definitive set of seasons. And I sort of try and make that point wherever I talk about it, that I've come up with what I think are a nice sort of compromise, if you like, for a lot of southern Australia. I do think Aboriginal seasons in most areas are a great way of recognising what's going on, and there are many of those. So yeah, it's more about having a discussion about things and just accepting the bleeding obvious, which is that we don't have the four seasons generally that they have in London.
Now I don't know about you, but that is the sound of my summer. Once the cicadas start singing, I know that summer is coming. But how did we get all these different seasonal calendars?
Fascinating if you look at the seasons around the world, and we have this tendency to think, generally these four seasons must be accepted, but the more you look at it, even, as you say, the pagan calendars have different seasons based on different things. A lot have them centered around the solstice. China tends to do that, and even in places across, I suppose, Europe and in Ireland, they start the seasons at different times of year than they do in the UK. There's been in the US, they sort of switch from starting on the first of the month to the sort of solstice day, the 21st, 22nd, around in the 60s. So there's a lot of inconsistency, even outside Australia.
I asked Dr. John Ryan from Edith Cowan University in Perth what it was like for him as he transitioned from North America to Australia.
One of the differences I've noticed, say, with the four-season model here versus in the United States, is that the beginnings of the seasons in the United States begin on the equinox. So the 21st of September is the beginning of autumn. The 21st of December is the beginning of winter, so forth. In Australia, that occurs on the first of the month, and that was for bureaucratic reasons, to simplify the season changes. So, yes, we have these sort of at least two models that come into conflict and often, contradict one another. It's the institutionalized model of the seasons, and then there's the land-based truth of the seasons.
I talked with John about his experience on encountering the six-seasoned Noongar calendar, covering the southwestern region of Western Australia.
There's a kind of a reading of the landscape involved when you're aware of the six seasons, where you're looking for indicators, you're looking for signs, and you're also you also give yourself over to a different sense of time. These transitions between the seasons happen in this very protracted way. This six-season thinking is really also involves a shift in one's understanding of time. So in the narrative of the landscape that emerges through this kind of six-season awareness, it's completely unlike a sort of a spring, summer, winter, fall pattern of thinking.
I love the fact that up in the north there's all these subtle sort of building up to the west, and they're things people talk about, but because we're not used to it, we don't sort of set them as seasons, don't give them a name, I suppose. And as you say, it varies right across Australia. And when I looked at it, I found between 2 and 8, and it turns out there's a 13 seasons in one area, which I hadn't sort of picked up when I was writing a book on this. But between 2 and 8, most typically 6. 6 is very, very common. And I only found one place, and I've moved in the north of central Australia, maybe Northern Territory anyway, that had 4 seasons. But, it's typically not 4, and it's quite variable. That's the other thing I think people don't understand or don't get used to. Things do vary each year by a few weeks. Each year it's quite different. Sometimes it goes back, sometimes forward, and I think we're not so used to that either.
A series of questions can be asked. Simply, what is a season? And how and why do we respond, plants and animals respond to the season and other natural phenomena? How does it all fit in, and how does a sense of place and time work its way into an Indigenous calendar?
Do you respond to seasons because of the changes around you, which is what I do and what a lot of people ringing up Botanic Gardens are doing? They see things in flower, they see the first daffodil. Or do you respond to the weather, the kind of the temperature and other things? And sometimes it can, feel quite cold, but the plants have responding to something that happened a few months ago, and that they can be different kinds of seasons, so they're almost sort of all these overlapping different cycles, if you like.
Well, that's true, because plants have their own way of reading the natural environment for themselves.
Yeah, they're reading day length for a start, so how long's the day, and they're reading rainfall and temperature, and it might be something that happened, it's 3 months ago when their bud was forming, or it might be something that happened when they're putting on new growth. And it's such a complicated system. I mean, I find it fascinating, and I think we know so little about it. In a way, we really don't understand a lot about, particularly plants, but also animals, what they're responding to and how they're responding, and what makes them do what they do.
Indigenous Weather Knowledge Project became a real interesting focal point for me to think through time, seasonality, and a concept that I was working with, which I called it's called phenomenology, but really the way that I saw phenomenology is phenology and phenomenology. Phenology being the kind of ecological practice of cataloging changes over the course of the year, changes in the flora and fauna, and phenomenology being the philosophical tradition of experiential depth and sensory awareness. So my idea was simply that we need to know about the seasons. We need to know the cognitively, the structure and the names and this sort of thing. But the only really long-lasting way that we know the seasons is through our own experience. So what I argued is that the Indigenous Weather Knowledge Project provides the phenology, provides the structure for understanding the seasons, but we need to get out there in the bush and walk and have regular direct contact with the landscape to know the seasons in a bodily way, and I think that's a very important dimension.
Professor Entwisle has taken this knowledge on board and written a book, Sprinter and Sprjummer, Australia's Changing Seasons. challenging the traditional four seasons and encouraging us to think about how we view changes in our natural world.
I didn't want to appropriate information and change what Aboriginal seasons are at. I didn't feel that was right for me as a sort of a white European writing about this. But the other interesting thing is that their seasons are based very much, as they should be really, on things that change each year. So, the eels spawn or the wattles come into seed, and the start and end of season is a little bit flexible. It's not a precise date, and that's really exactly as it should be. But for poor Western European minds like mine, as a scientist, I struggle with all that, and I have to put a date on it. So I came up with these sort of more precise seasons, if you like. But I do think in reality they've got the Aboriginal communities who've been here tens of thousands of years. They got it right, where each year would be slightly different, and you'd celebrate and acknowledge and note that because it's useful if you're living off the land, but it's also, I think, a useful thing if you're trying to understand the land and trying to live with the land a little bit, like we probably should be doing more of these days.
I'm very much a regionalist at heart. I'm interested in what's immediately around me, and so the research that I've been drawn to do is very much local, like that wetland around that side of the campus, or the issues that are at least relevant to the southwest of WA. What I found though is that this sort of thinking is not everyone's focus.
That's more interesting in a way than coming up with a set of seasons that might sort of apply across the country. It's knowing what's going on in your little area and remembering, and that's why writing down is quite interesting, because one of the things I find, and I find this myself, this is not a criticism of anyone else, but we forget.
And certainly there is a drive in universities in Australia and presumably elsewhere to internationalize. So the danger there is that the local and the regional can be given less importance. But I really feel like paying attention to where you are and being sensitive to the local cultural and environmental landscape is really important to doing research and contributing back to the community of which you're part.
You think, this seems to be early, isn't it early this year? And you look back and it may well be the same as happened every year, but you do forget when things flower. And that comes back to that point of we tend to reset the clock all the time, or reset it back against these Vivaldi seasons.
So there is a tension there. I think that there should be more local awareness built into the curriculum across all disciplines.
Detecting the changes in the seasons that we experience at the moment, I think, is interesting and important, and will help us to sort of better appreciate the place in the country we live in, or the region we live in, or local area we live in. But also, I think if we're thinking about bigger topics like climate change and how the environment is changing, if we're trying to assess that against seasons that don't make any sense in the first place, we're never going to notice or really understand those changes. So certainly as part of that thinking, we have to better understand the changes that go on and have gone on for hundreds, thousands, whatever number of years, before we can understand the changes that might happen over the next few decades or centuries. So I do think seasons are important in understanding the place you live in and better connecting to that country and that land. And then secondly, if you're really going to detect any changes, you've got to understand what happened in what the existing arrangements are first.
You've been listening to another episode from Sound Minds Radio, produced for the Community Radio Network. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, or visit our website, soundminds.com.au.